TopMedTalk.
Well, welcome to day 3, final day of the ASA Anesthesiology 2021 annual meeting. We want to thank the American Society of Anesthesiologists for having us here this weekend. It's been a fantastic weekend. We are TopMedTalk coming to you live from the exhibit hall. I'm Desiree Chappell, your host, and I'm joined by my co-host, Professor Monty Mythen, Editor-in-Chief of TopMedTalk and Professor of Critical Care and Anesthesia at the University College London. Monty, I think we said that a couple times.
Good morning, Desiree. Day 3, and it's still great to be here.
It is still great to be here. I think we're on the final day, and we're wrapping things up, but we still have a full day of really cool conversations.
I mean, sometimes you're flagging by day 3, but I mean, everyone is so excited to be here.
Yeah.
We can't. I'm sorry to all those people who may not have been out much yet, but it's great to see what looks like a semblance of normality returning to this world.
A little bit. We're also joined by Professor Sol Aronson. Hello, Sol.
Hey, Desiree. It's real, and like things that are real, day 3, we're now getting more relaxed and comfortable in our skins, and that's also a reflection of just how cool it is to be amongst the walking and talking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, we've been having some great conversations on TopMedTalk over the last 2 days. All of that content, Monty, can be found on our live.ebpom.org site, right?
Yeah, and we put the podcasts out as well, so multiple platforms of which you can access the information, and it's enduring. So, I this morning was catching up on one of the interviews I missed yesterday. Yeah. I missed the Lee Fleischer interview, which was
beautiful,
awesome, and the Evan Koresh interview, which was also most excellent, as they all have been so far.
And people can still get into it. It's free to subscribe for access, and we encourage everybody to catch up on those things that they had not had a chance to see live, but they're going to be there enduring for a while.
So all of our podcasts are free and have always been free, so there's over 1,500 of those now.
Do you mean free?
Free. Now, I'd have to explain, this is European free. Okay. You don't have to give a credit card to get the free stuff, if you said. I mean, it stays free. Okay. You just, log on and it's free. And the platform and all of our on-demand content from our conferences this year is free to everybody for this month if they come in here. Getting access to the CME is different depending on where you are in the world, but, please do have a look. Enjoy.
Yeah. And, I want to get to our guests really quickly, but later on, remind me, we'll talk about TopMedTalk and EBPOM and how we're all connected there, so I don't want to forget that. But I really want to bring in our next guest, Dr. Rick Dutton. Rick, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
You have to sit around here and listen to us banter back and forth.
But, no. I have paid money in the past to listen to both Monty and Sol.
And we
now
paid
it's
money to listen
free.
to you, Rick.
There we go. Right back at you. That's right.
That's awesome. Well, Rick, for everyone watching today or listening, tell us just a little bit more about yourself.
So currently I am the Chief Quality Officer for U.S. Anesthesia Partners, arguably the largest private practice, maybe in any specialty in the world. I have about 2,000 partner anesthesiologists who collectively own our company. And we have 4,500 clinicians altogether right now, so big operation. I'm there specifically because it is big and it gives me the chance to do stuff.
Yeah.
And I got here. You want to hear how I got here?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. So this is not you've done a lot more work in the space of anesthesiology.
I tell people I'm on my 3rd career.
Yeah.
So I started as an academic. I came out of training, did my payback with the Navy, and then I was at shock trauma in Baltimore, the University of Maryland, for 17 years. So I had a just fine career as an academic anesthesiologist. I studied hemorrhagic shock, brain injury, trauma systems, and all like that. And I still do some of that. I am the trauma editor for anesthesia and analgesia. And I'm connected to that community, help launch the current professional society there, and so on. And I love that. So that's my home. In 2009, though, my career took a turn. And I went to work for the American Society of Anesthesiologists. I was actually the, physician in residence there for 6 years. I was the only doctor in the building most days. And specifically to launch the Anesthesia Quality Institute and set up our National Anesthesia Registry in the U.S., NACORP. And I did that for 6 years. Got to see everything in American anesthesiology and make friends around the world. And then that the entrepreneurial part of that job faded. We were successful, and so it became a bureaucracy, at which point it's time to move on.
Yeah.
And one of the issues with being at the AQI is I could see everything. I had a good understanding, good perspective on what was going on in anesthesia, but I couldn't really do anything. So hence the current job. So sort of move laterally in private practice. It's big. We're nationwide. I still get to see what's going on. But now I get to actually do stuff, too.
Affect change.
I can affect change. Exactly right.
Yeah, for a large part.
And Rick, when you say do stuff, can you just elaborate a little bit on what does that mean? As opposed to coalesce and collect data, what does do stuff mean?
Yeah, so at the AQI, I could say, this perioperative surgical home stuff, enhanced recovery, this is important. We should do this. And I wrote articles, and I pushed people, and I lectured and said, we should do this. We really should do this. Come on,
it's the
we
right
should do
thing
this.
To do.
At USAP, I can go to my partners and say, here's a protocol for colorectal surgery, and I have the advantage, because we're big, I can pick it up somewhere where it's working really well, take it to somewhere where they haven't done it yet, and say, here, here's a running head start at this. Here are the steps you need to do to actually implement this protocol. Find your surgeon, sit down with them, talk to the hospital, hire somebody to run it, and really lay it out and make it happen. And that's a pleasure. I walked into USAP and said, one of the things we need to do for the future, we need to measure patient satisfaction. We need to understand patient satisfaction. And being in the private sector, I went to my boss and said, we need to measure patient satisfaction. And he said, okay. So we did. We have a nationwide contract with Survey Vitals. I don't know if they're here anywhere, but we send a validated patient satisfaction survey to every patient we touch. And our current response rate's about 40%. So I get 1 million return surveys a year is how
Brilliant.
That math works out. And I probably know more about what patients think about anesthesia than just about anybody as a result.
Rick, a recurring theme in the conversations we've been having here is change is really, really hard, and cultural challenges are there, and FTI is a new TLA, 3-letter abbreviation, failure to implement being so common. Do you have any secret sauce? Any tips that you're able to share?
For making change happen?
Yeah.
Hang on, let me get my pen.
I was just going to say.
Yeah.
So some of it's the usual stuff.
Yeah.
Right. I get to work again with a coalition of the willing. So I have a nationwide quality committee. I've identified all the anesthesiologists in all our groups around the country who are most interested in change and improving things. And we have a call once a month. We talk through, okay, here's the next things we're going to do. Here are the projects. As I said, we share best practices, and we have all of the tools of the information age to do it. So we have an internal discussion board. There's a bulletin board, and there's a giant documents library, and so you can get all this stuff. And that just by itself, just having those conversations is enormously helpful. So some anesthesiologist in Jacksonville says, we ran out of heavy bupivacaine for spinals because it's on national back order. What are you doing for your C-sections? And within 10 minutes, and this is a real conversation on our bulletin board, 10 minutes later, somebody from the other side of the country posted, this happened to us last year. We switched to 0.5% bupivacaine. Here's the protocol. Here's what we wrote up for our P&T committee. Take it.
Sharing.
It's what it is.
So fair enough, and that's a cool example. But I'm going to push you further. Process is more difficult than substituting drug A for drug B. And so to Monty's question and point, as you survey best practice with the opportunities you have, one size doesn't fit all. And so change implementation must be hard. And the lessons you've learned by trying to apply the best practice in zip code A to what could be a potential bump in quality in zip code B must be challenging as heck. How do you manage that?
From the biggest picture down to the little. So the big picture, get your incentives aligned. So I joined USAP very specifically. I joke that I made the most informed job decision in the history of our specialty. I was running the National Registry. I had visited hundreds of practices around the country. I had data. I knew who was doing what and how they were doing it. So I picked USAP very specifically because I liked the model. Physician ownership, but with resources. So we have scope and scale. We have the ability to do stuff. The willingness to do stuff. I mean, they said, John Zerwas recruited me to USAP. He was former ASA president. I'd worked for him at the ASA and was one of the founders of USAP. He said, look, Rick, we want to be the highest quality group in America. Come tell us how to do that and prove that we are. I mean, that was a very attractive offer, to be perfectly honest, and a really cool job. But that is, so my job description, and I put it up on talks internally and externally, be the best, prove it.
Can we change his job description?
That's it.
So Rick, can I dive in there? So as you've referred to, you're a business. Actually, we're all in a business, even if we're whichever. The National Health Service is a business.
Yep.
Are you allowed to compete on quality?
I am. That's a very interesting question. So my attitude.
If that makes sense.
No. I think about this all the time. So quality should be free.
Yeah.
And in fact, any anesthesiologist in America, I will happily share our data with. We have research contracts or data sharing agreements with a dozen academic places around the country. I send a de-identified USAP data set to them. There are people who have all our patient satisfaction data to chew through, write papers, whatever, for example. And I believe that. On the business side, the business case for that is the faster you give away quality, the better your brand gets, the more of a leader you become, and it differentiates us as a business. So, yes, I can go have a conversation with a hospital executive and say, here's why you want USAP, here are the scorecards we'll give you back data, we'll tell you about your business, we'll help you run efficiently. That's sticky at a very granular level. But at the national level, we are the brand. And having a brand around quality has worked for Mercedes, right?
Yeah.
And lots of other industries. That's our position, that's our location, and that's what I'm selling.
I've got one follow-up on that. So, I mean, if you offer quality as part of, let's call it a deal, so you strike a contract and you say, we will deliver quality, and therefore, by default, one always delivers value if you deliver quality, in my experience. If that results in a bigger margin as a result of the payment model, can you strike a deal where you share that margin as an incentivized? Because I've always believed in any market that's a good incentive. It's an appropriate incentive.
Yeah, so we do that both tangibly and intangibly. One of the ways in which one of our aspects of bestness has to do with business practice. We're big enough, we can go have somebody very professional negotiate our managed care contracts. We're in a cutthroat battle with insurance companies over dollars, and at that side of the business, it really is a business. We have the best person in the world doing our contracts. So, not surprisingly, there's a lift from that, right? Because we are internally more solvent as a result, when we go to a hospital that is paying a stipend for anesthesia services, it doesn't have to be as high for us. That's intangible. We don't talk about that. I can't measure it, and I'm probably already in trouble with my general counsel for saying that. But that's reality.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's, for a smart hospital executive, this makes sense. More tangibly and more directly, we were talking at dinner last night. I recently did a deal with one of our major payers in Florida where we have a specific incentive about lowering hospital readmissions. And it is specific. Over the next 5 years, we will get X amount of incentive dollars for every readmission we prevent. And, we have a baseline. We've tracked it for years. We did it all with the insurance company's data, so they trust it, right, because it's their information. And it began with a conversation. They said, we want to do value-based contracting. I hear this all the time. I said, okay, sure, we're down with that. And then they don't usually know what that means in anesthesia or what that can mean. And I've had a lot of these conversations now, so I at least have some idea of where we're trying to get. So I said, well, the simple way is we just take our MIPS measures, our federal measures that we report to CMS, and we share those with you, and we can set benchmarks and thresholds. And I've done a dozen deals like that around the country. So we have that with a bunch of payers, commercial payers in the U.S. But that's a starting point for me, and it's very soft. We're all cynical about those measures and what they mean and how they actually improve care. But where I find engagement, like I did in Florida, there's a next layer to that. So I said, I'm happy to talk to you about some real outcomes that matter. And this one wound up being readmissions. That was actually the second idea, maybe the third that I pitched them. The first was, let us lower 90-day opiate use. Mm-hmm. Again, in the U.S. healthcare ecosystem, it's the payer who has that data, right? Because they're paying for that prescription 90 days out. So they actually have the 2 data points you need. They had surgery. 90 days later, they're filling an opiate prescription. That's the one I wanted to do, and I think that's probably the biggest buck in this. I'm still trying. If anybody's listening, we'd love to do this with you because I think we can lean in and influence that. All right? Yeah. They wound up being more interested in readmissions. We benchmarked it in their data. Every patient readmitted after surgery for them cost them $27,000. We're splitting it with them for everyone that we save.
And so that's wonderful. Congratulations. And I understand the 90-day opiate because it's easier to tether that, if you will, to actions. That being said, readmission is cool too. How do you own that? I mean, when people realize that you are progressive enough to have that discussion, how does an anesthesiology deliverable
reduce readmissions?
Own that. I'm not going to challenge how we reduce readmissions, but how do you stay claim to that?
Yeah. So first of all, I went there because of my prior experience. When I was at the trauma center, I was the chief of operations for the center for about a decade. I managed patient flow, and it's a weird job for an anesthesiologist to do, but I got sucked into it because we were all traumatologists. Many of us were doctors. We're thinking holistically about the patient, what they needed. And I happened to get pulled into that and learned a lot about it. So I know it's possible. That's the first thing. And that's what made me put it on the table, was I know we can do this. I had a much harder sell internally. So go back to my partners in Florida and say, hey, we just did this deal. And they're like, what? How do we affect readmissions? But the bottom line is we're doctors. And if we want to be doctors and think broadly about the patient, we have to own that outcome. And this is something we can do. And once we commit to addressing the problem, and now we have an incentive so I can get people motivated, after that, it's sort of quality improvement 101.
So Rick, I'm going to push you just a little bit further. I'm not challenging that, and I get that, and I think it's way cool. My question, more specifically, is how does anesthesiology own that versus an other specialty stake claim to that?
Much like the brand question, anybody could own this. I am choosing to. So, yes, the surgeons could have stepped up and had exactly the same conversation. A hospitalist could have stepped up and had exactly the same conversation with the hospital. I got there first.
Okay, that's the answer.
If I may, so we at our Royal College of Anaesthetists back in the UK, let's go back a little bit, we were discussing national targets that represent quality for our specialty. And the room was divided. There was a group of people who said we should concentrate on the recovery room and pain in recovery and nausea and temperature and all the what I think is the yawn stuff. I know it's important, but that should have disappeared, really. That sort of should be standard practice. The other half of the room was saying we should own length of stay, readmission, major complications, because we have the greatest influence on those things, because we talked about this at dinner last night. Our surgical colleagues are all perfect or close to perfect. They cut in the right place. They put the stitches in appropriately. They do a fantastic job. But we have a huge impact as team anesthesia. Right. This is not just the provision of anesthesia per se, but the whole pathway. We have the biggest impact. And if we're not prepared to own that, we're devaluing ourselves.
Yeah, I'm with Monty 100% on that.
You're singing to a member of the choir.
Yeah. Don't sing, by the way, Sol.
You had me at hello, but I'm only presuming the challenges of such a position, and your answer is perfectly understood and acceptable. We did it, they didn't.
Yeah, and to go to an older example, when I was doing this at the trauma center, so it was a great example because it was a 100-bed box that I could completely own. We had a length of stay issue. We had a too many patients, not enough beds issue. And, one day the governor calls and says, why is my trauma center closed? And this is not a pleasant conversation. It was not in Baltimore from my boss, the chief of the center. We started a process to address that, and I got pulled into that. But by the time I left, we were benchmarked against every other trauma center in the country. Our length of stay for equivalent diagnoses was 2 days shorter on average for our entire population. And in the state of Maryland, under a relatively capitated payment system from the state, and I won't get into the details, but essentially we were getting some amount of money for every admission. If we could make them go home 2 days faster and stay there, and our readmission rates were low, our complication rate, all the collateral stuff was working as well, we made a lot of money. I ran the only profitable trauma center in America for a decade. And that was why. Because we had a relatively fixed income, but we spent it very wisely and we ran very efficiently. I believe it's possible to do. So in Florida, it turned out to be easy. Sat down with a hospital CMO and said, we're interested in this readmission thing. Oh, that's a huge problem for us because they're getting dinged by Medicare for their readmission rate. It's a major hospital metric. So again, this was part of picking the right pilot. I knew we were going to be aligned with the hospital on this. Let's get a group together to work on it. So we're leading a committee, and it's, as I say, Quality Improvement 101. Why are people getting readmitted? What are the causes? Let's start looking at those. Which ones can we impact? How do we do that? And we're wading into that.
Okay. Desiree, may I pivot us for a second?
Monty,
because
please.
Rick, we interviewed you from Ireland recently about a novel antiemetic, and we should, full disclosure, Acacia Pharma are one of our sponsors. Thank you very much indeed for your sponsorship. They're not directly sponsoring this session, but we should acknowledge that. And we discussed a novel antiemetic, amisulpride. And we don't want to go into the detail of that now because we've recorded some long-form lectures. But as part of the conversation, you were able to tell us how an organization like yours could evaluate a novel technology. And it seemed as though the power of that evaluation was sort of going to usurp, to some extent, research endeavors. Because I'm potentially confusing people there. Traditional research endeavors are the randomized controlled trial. You've got a big system. You can roll out an innovation, you can track it, and at the end of it you can say it did or didn't work for us. And if it did work for you, it should work for others. Is that a reasonable summary?
Yes, exactly. Yep. So one of the fun parts of my job is I get to survey the world of anesthesia, perioperative care, and find the cool stuff as it emerges. Mm-hmm. And every time I find one of these, I blast it out to all of my partners. We have an actual format for it in our internal newsletter, a new tech alert. Right? Here's a new medication, here's a new bit of equipment, here's a new technique, here's new software. Think about it. And I'm casting it out to 4,500 clinicians, and somewhere out there it's going to fall on fertile ground. And they'll say, that's exactly what we need. And they'll pick it up and use it. And then I get the feedback of, did it work, did it not work, how is it incorporated? And we share that internally as well. And if it's something really cool, it will spread. So enhanced recovery started a few sites where we were, had champions and we're really doing that well, and now it's everywhere. In fact, we don't really talk about enhanced recovery anymore. It's just recovery.
Recovery.
Thank you.
When you do that, and that's, a uniquely special, unique because it's sort of not traditional now that you're coalescing, the sort of universe of practices into a commonality of... How do you collect the data so that there's meaningfulness to it? In other words, is it a free-for-all, give us your opinion, your thoughts, your feedback, or do you structure it in a way that it can be organized more easily?
Some of both. So we have a good internal data system. It cannot be as granular as what you would have at Duke inside one EMR umbrella, where you can get a lot of data all the way down to very specific medications and vital signs. I get that some places, but I have a lot of IT challenges across 1,000 sites.
Right.
However, we do our own internal data collection. I mentioned the patient satisfaction system. We do similar things for quality metrics and all of our basic demographics, the administrative data. It's all in one place. We can look at it. So that's the sort of objective side. And there are some things in it we can pull out. We do capture severe PONV or PONV leading to an admission or something. So I'll have some data points about that. But a lot of new stuff in anesthesia, and this is not new, Monty. This is going back probably 150 years, honestly. Let us get our hands on it, try it out, and see how it fits. So when amisulpride arrives, I look at it and say, this could be cool. And I'm a skeptic. I have no idea if it's really going to help or not. I have 6 other antiemetics, after all, and, you know. But it's new. It has potential. I like the message they're giving me. This is good for rescue, right? So they picked a good spot to go. It is a problem we need to solve. So my goal for our business was, how do we get our hands on this? And so I am perfectly willing, and I did. I work in the Baylor system in Dallas. I went to the Baylor P&T committee, which is 50 hospitals and a giant bureaucracy designed to keep the hospital from spending money on new stuff. And I said, there's this new thing, we need it. And my partners are mostly all working in the OR taking care of patients. Part of my job is going and fighting that battle through the P&T committee. And we worked it through. I went back and forth with them several times until they approved it. And we wrote them a protocol for, how we will use it responsibly and not break the bank on it. But the goal was to get it in the hands of my partners so we can find out if it helps.
So just to pull back and look at that theme in a broader stroke, and I may be feeding you a big fat hanging curveball right now, but what is the role or evolving role of the practice, the big practice, in offering real world, if you will, application, real world user case experience? It's not development, it's not safety and efficacy in phase 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of formality, but it's just the real world user case experience of applicability. We don't measure that traditionally. What's the problem with us not measuring that traditionally? And what is the role of the bigger practices now to be able to fill that gap going forward?
So the reason we don't get more pragmatic data informing our practice is the Tower of Babel that is healthcare IT right now. And I alluded to that a minute ago, right? I have many different IT systems I am trying to get data from. There's no universal format. Every one of those is a building-by-building battle to build the link and maintain it, because it's not static. And I am fighting that and will for the rest of my career, right? I will, every time I sit down with one of our Epic places, is let's talk about how we get a better Epic extract. Here's my wish list, for what I want coming back into my warehouse to make us smarter anesthesiologists. And it starts with just really simple stuff like length of stay and did they die before they left the hospital. Because, a surprising number of patients we anesthetize do die before they leave the hospital. We have no idea.
Sorry, what's the definition of death? No, just kidding.
yeah, exactly. And so that's the starting point. But it goes all the way down to we'd really love to have a smooth feed of all our vital signs, all our medications, everything that's in the Epic AIMS flowing back into our warehouse, because we could become really smart if I can connect. Did we use this antiemetic did this patient get treated for nausea 24 hours later, did their troponins bump, or did they have AKI, and when did they go home?
But if let's say, if a system that big, if you can start with, as you alluded to, death, length of stay, readmission rates, and some sense of patient satisfaction, you can say which institutions have got the best results. Let's go and ask them what they're doing. And see if, and you then do your case mix adjustment and turn out everyone's looking after the same sort of patients. And you say, should we copy what they're doing and see if everyone gets better?
Yeah.
That's great, isn't it?
Yeah. So to answer your question, Sol, as I dig into this problem, we get more and more data every day. We get better and better at integrating those data points, and it will make us progressively smarter over time in a way that doesn't need traditional science.
And then, therefore, to be visionary and projecting the future, the role of the USAPs or bigger mega practices to fill that gap in the sort of application of science going forward is exciting. How far are we away from that being a reality?
We're doing it today. I'll give you 2 examples. So we're in a collaborative with some other large group practices to share granular blood pressure data. As I already said, I don't have it everywhere, but I have it some places. I'll put that in a pool. So will North Star. So will Envision, some of our other large groups, which will let us define at a millions of cases level what is the incidence of intraoperative hypotension, right? The ASA floated this measure a year ago. they need validation about it now. And here's an opportunity to pull a bunch of data that's from the real world in real, no kidding, everyday anesthesia practice and start to look at that. That one's kind of simple, but and it will progress. As we pull the data together, we'll get into looking at, okay, now can we take some subset of that and connect it to a troponin or a creatinine or a length of stay. And so this will happen. Another one, and maybe more exciting, is I can use my IT infrastructure bidirectionally. So I'm working with some researchers at Penn to take our infrastructure and start providing nudges to my anesthesiologists.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about.
They have a very good behavioral economics group there, and I'm working with Mark Newman. We just published today in the New England Journal. The Regain trial came out, which is something many of my partners participated in, because I've known Mark for a long time, and I set up a bunch of our groups to contribute patients to that. So our next project, and the grants are cooking right now, will be to look at deprescribing benzodiazepines in older patients. So something we clearly need to know to do. We took a look at the pragmatic data. Again, I scraped 500,000 cases from USAP, and turns out 80-year-olds are getting benzodiazepines at, a non-zero rate. And that's probably bad. We'd like to fix that. The science is there, the evidence is there, this is the right thing to do. The mechanism of this grant will be once a week or so when you open the app to put in the data to USAPs. You can get paid for that case, and we use iPhone apps to collect this data at the point of care. And every clinician has to open that every case, every day. So I know I have their eyeballs for that minute. A little box will pop up. It says, hey, don't give benzodiazepines to old people. And the experts at Penn are going to help me write these. So that, we get the nudge.
Well, that would work too.
we get the nudge in the right format. But that's the idea. So we can start to use the infrastructure the other way of actually changing practice on a hopefully broad scale. We'll find out.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it is. Well, Rick, we literally could just sit and talk. I know, all day long.
We have.
And geek out even longer.
I'm going to do my terrible thing I say, Desiree, and I've got one very brief last thing. Mark Newman's fantastic trial. Can you share the result? I don't want to steal his thunder, but can you share the result, Rick? Because it is out now.
Yes. So if you read the official conclusion of the abstract, no difference between general anesthesia and spinal anesthesia for hip fracture surgery.
And it's a massive trial done over a number of years.
Yes, massive, multiple centers, multiple sites, many years. In fact, it may be the largest trial ever funded in anesthesia, specifically in anesthesia in the United States. I am not surprised by that result at all. No. When you read into the data, though, what I suspect we will actually take away as actionable change from that, and I will admit I have not gone and looked at the details yet. I need to get my hands on it. But I suspect what it will show is that the real key to getting a good result from hip fractures is to do it sooner rather than later. So I suspect there will be a big time signal in how quickly you fix the hip. That's going to be the take-home.
So great data and important study. I must confess, my bias has always been my hypothesis that has now probably been disproven, is that when we put in the spinal for those elderly people who break their hip, there's a moment of low blood pressure. We treat it, but I always presume that moment of low blood pressure was causing long-term harm. And but
let's not get into those weeds.
Yeah.
So what was the name of the trial?
Regain.
Okay. And New England Journal of Medicine came out today. I just got a ping through on my feed this morning.
Yeah, and I know it's out, and like I say, I've been following this trial for a long time.
And Mark Newman spelt the other way.
The other way. The other Mark Newman.
Yeah, the other Mark Newman. Rick, it's always fun to just chit-chat. You bring us to another level.
Yeah, Joy. Thank you so much. We really appreciate taking the time during this very busy meeting. I know for you, it's great seeing you. Hopefully we can continue the conversation, working together on a lot of the things that we're trying to move the needle on quality, right?
Absolutely, Desiree. Thank you very much for having me. Professor?
Thank
you very much.
All right, and thanks for watching TopMedTalk. Monty, we promised we were going to say EBPOM, TopMedTalk.
TopMedTalk's the broadcasting arm of evidence-based perioperative medicine, and EBPOM's been around since 1997, trying to bring the global community that's interested in perioperative care together on a regular basis, just like we're doing right now.
Absolutely. Check us out, ebpom.org, topmedtalk.com. We're on all your favorite social media platforms. Cheers.
TopMedTalk.
Thanks for downloading TopMedTalk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.